Happy birthday to the United States Air Force. September 18th marks 75 years of the Air Force and the Air National Guard. Great Falls is home to both. We're diving into the history on this episode of We're No Damn Experts.
Best damn podcast, the best damn town. You want to get up, get ready to get down. With its big wide sky and the wild river Thames, if you want to go, we can take you there to Great Falls, Montana.
Welcome to the greatest damn town in Montana, Great Falls. I'm Rebecca Ingham.
I'm Shannon Newth,
and we're No Damn Experts. And Shannon,
yes,
will you
Yes,
introduce our guest for today?
yes. Oh, no other comments from you
No,
before
I'm
we
going
get
to
in
say no.
Okay.
It's too late in the day.
It is late. Wednesday afternoon, getting the day going. Yes, day going. See, my brain's gone too.
Ooh.
All right. Anyway, let's get to our guest. In studio with us, we have Troy Hallsell, PhD.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. You didn't know that, did you?
No.
Learning
I
things
think
already.
I might have heard that. So we'll get into that.
Okay. She has other stories.
PhD.
Rumors. PhD. Doctor of History. Well, that's probably not the accurate thing, but historian for Malmstrom Air Force Base, the 341st Missile Wing. Hello, Troy. Thanks for being here.
Hello.
Should we call you Dr. Troy?
No, you just call me Troy.
Dr. Hallsell.
Yeah.
No.
Like Dr. Troy.
So that's your actual job as historian at Malmstrom?
Yes. So I am. So,
Are
so there's-
you active military?
No, civilian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, it's an interesting military job. But
They used to
It
be.
is, yeah.
So my position used to be a uniform position way back when.
Okay.
But as I understand it, probably the last 10 years, they turned all of those, we call them billets, but job positions from uniformed to civilian. And I surmise that it's because, uniformed folks, they change duty assignments, right? They go from
Mhm.
base
Oh,
to
yeah.
base to base. And it's not like this is what your job is, but like it's my job to create the institutional memory of the 341st Missile Wing.
holy crap,
And
that's a big order.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah. It's still easy and fun, though, so I don't really mind.
Well, that's good.
Well, we had Christy Scott on the podcast,
Mhm.
and she runs the History Museum for all of you who aren't paying attention to what our episodes are. And we really shared or acknowledged that she could come on the podcast at least once a month for the rest of her life and share a different story about this area. It's got to be the same about the 341st.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. So for me, what I find myself actually doing kind of a regular basis is that like the history of the wing and the base are not necessarily the same thing. And in fact, they don't actually meet up until the early 60s.
Oh.
So
It's because it wasn't the 340. I'm pretending like I know what I'm talking about. It was because it was the Great
do
Falls
that well.
Army Air Base
Army something.
prior to. You'll get into it. We'll talk. You continue
that's
with your
a great
story.
segue. That's a great segue. So
Why
we'll-
don't you
yeah, so-
take over, because we clearly have no clue what we're talking about.
So the military first gets its kind of modern day presence that we have with us today during World War II, and so in the early 40s, boosters, your Chamber of Commerce folks and stuff
Okay,
like that,
yep.
start lobbying the Army Air Forces. So that's the precursor to the United States Air Force.
See, Army Air Force. I got that term right.
Don't pat yourself on the back too quickly. Come on.
But they started lobbying the Army Air Forces to bring a military base here to Great Falls, Montana. And the big reason is that the Depression's still going on, right? So like the Depression hit, Montana in the 20s long before it hit the rest of the nation. So like a lot of the agricultural communities started feeling that long before your industrial centers in New York or in stockyards in Chicago and stuff like that.
Sucky thing to be first in, but
Yeah.
we'll take
Go
it.
us. Yeah.
So they're asking, hey, can you bring a presence here? And so there's a lot of back and forth, and there's lobbying. You get all your senators and your congressmen involved, all that kind of stuff. And lo and behold, the Army Air Forces goes, okay, fine, we'll do that. We're going to put one base up on Gore Hill by the municipal airport,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then another base, which became later, which is now Malmstrom. It was, I think at the time, it was like 6, 7, 8, 9 miles east of basically the city line. And so they got to building all. In fact, the story that I've kind of heard snippets of is that area was kind of a hotbed for prohibition booze running.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
And so
not
they kind of
surprising.
dropped
Yeah.
a base on top of it to try to squash.
Disperse some of that.
some
That
of
makes
that.
a little sense.
Uh-huh.
And when you were saying 6 to 7 miles east of Great Falls, I'm like, so they moved it? And then I'm like, oh,
They're like, no, the original
Great Falls.
Great Falls.
Great Falls,
Great Falls
didn't
expanded
go that
to
far
the east.
then.
Yes.
God.
Didn't go
About
much.
every 4 years, I just kind of picked it up
Yeah,
and moved it back
moved it.
60 feet.
Yeah, we got to
Easy.
get a little further out of
Yeah.
town.
Easy to do. Pick up a whole base. Why initially were there? Why did they kind of bookend the sides of towns versus just
Yeah.
create one location?
That part is completely unclear to me. I
Okay.
think part of it was that they had to build the Malmstrom Air Force Base. So like they literally had to build it from nothing.
Oh,
And so it took I think it's something like 2,500 workers working 24 hours a day, almost an entire year, to build the most basic of infrastructure. So like 4 runways, your barracks, chapel. There's some MWR, some morale, welfare resources, stuff like
Okay.
that. It just takes time.
yeah.
And so, but there was already an airport up here, right? And so
Yeah.
that had already been in existence. And so it's like, well, we can use that. We'll build this. And then what ended up happening over time, there were 2 different missions here.
Yep.
There was a B-17 bomber training mission
Mm-hmm.
on base there for about a year. And then once that stopped being a thing there, and I have no clue why,
Mm-hmm.
the 7th Ferrying Group that was moving something like, I got the numbers here written down, 5,000-6,000 aircraft from Great Falls up to Fairbanks. It started work up there and then slowly shifted over here to the base. Which that makes sense because you just needed so much space. Like you
Right.
got photographs from back in the mid 40s of just like you'd have 30 or 40 P-39 fighter planes just in a hangar ready to get checked out so we could fly them up to Fairbanks and give them to the Soviets so they can go kill Germans.
Yeah. Wow.
Still so weird to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So was the B-17 training mission the first mission at the land that Malmstrom occupies?
The Great Falls
Unless
Army
you
Air Force Base?
unless you count the actual building of which, because the Army Corps of Engineers built the base.
Oh.
Okay.
So technically yes, right? So
Okay.
it would have been
Okay.
the first kind of what we call an operational mission at the base was that B-17 training mission.
Okay. And that was in World War II
Correct.
era? Okay.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So at that point in time, you had 4 different bomber groups
Mm-hmm.
filtered through there, and they were usually there for I think about 3 months, and then they all ended up in either North Africa, Italy, or flying missions out of the United Kingdom, basically for the duration of the war until Victory in Europe Day,
Okay.
which I can't remember what that is.
So
Hey, that's all right. I mean,
Yeah.
you're only a doctor.
Yeah, that's right.
Dr. Troy. Just kidding. Okay, so for those who don't know, let's kind of go to present day right now, and then we'll go back again. So Great Falls is a big military town because of what we just talked about. And we still currently have those 2 locations, one up at the airport on Gore Hill and the east side of Great Falls. So there is what is now Malmstrom Air Force Base and then the Montana Air National Guard. What are, and the Guard is the one that currently has the flying mission. Yes.
Malmstrom has the helicopter thing. You can't negate.
I can't not say flying mission.
Right.
Okay. So
They
the-
both have flying missions.
Okay, the Montana Air National Guard has plane flying mission, which is currently the C-130s, and that's transitioned over the years from the F-16s to the F-15s and out to the cargo planes. But Malmstrom, I think a lot of people think Air Force. Well, of course, there is a plane flying mission,
Right.
but that's not the case here. So what is Malmstrom's current mission?
So current mission is the Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile.
Okay.
Right. So we have, and we both the base and Montana have 150 launch facilities scattered around
Ooh,
central
I didn't
Montana.
realize there was that many.
Yeah.
There was like
Well,
10.
and there was 50 more up until
Yeah.
basically the late 90s when the Cold War
Sure.
ended. And so basically our job is to maintain, man, operate, launch if necessary, those missiles at whomever the bad guys are of the day. And that's as much detail as I can
Yes.
go into.
The rest is
We
classified.
want more deeper details. Like,
Give us the secrets. No, please don't. I don't want to be responsible for that.
no, and I won't remember, so I'm fine. But not a couple years ago, probably 10, 15 years ago, things started to get weirder in the nation. And my parents, I believe my dad was like, well, I'm just glad we're here in Montana. We're safe here. And I just kind of looked at him. I'm like, I don't know much about military missions, but I will say this on record. I believe if there is another world level war, it is likely to be nuclear. And I think we would be the first people to get hit. I would, if I were planning
Either
a war.
we're really safe or really a big target.
If I was the bad guy planning a war, I would hit Montana first. That's where I would go. And my dad looked at me and he's like, well, I'm not going to be planning a war. But my dad's like, you really think so? I'm like, there's a lot of nuclear weapons around here. I would take them out.
We do have a lot of them.
So,
yeah.
Am I accurate in my assumptions?
Well, so I will say,
I'm not
He's like, I'm
qualified
not
to
going to
make that.
even support this theory. We're going to change topics completely.
so I will say that a lot of anti-nuclear activists back in the late 70s and throughout the early 80s actually referred to the Great Plains as a nuclear sponge. And the logic of both the building of this weapon system and also kind of some other reasons, even though it wasn't the primary, is that if the Soviet Union was going to launch its, more than likely, its own ICBMs, it would actually try to take out ours as well, right? And so back in the early 60s, I don't have the exact numbers because I did not write that down.
He's referencing, for the listeners, he's referencing his own articles that he's written,
like
by
his
the way.
own papers.
This is his own publications, yes.
And so... So it's interesting. So So I'll use that as an opportunity to kind of talk about kind of why these missiles are here.
Yeah.
So Malmstrom, or the 341st Missile Wing is known as Wing 1. So it's the first Minuteman missile wing.
Oh.
And the whole reason that happened was really because the engineers broke something. And they had to retool the Minuteman missile. So initially, it was supposed to go to Vandenberg Air Force, well, now Space Force Base, but Air Force Base north of Los Angeles. But when they went to actually go test out the first Minuteman, there was some problem with the in the first stage booster. So that's the initial booster that gets the Minuteman out of the ground, right? And so what ended up happening is that problem cut 2,000 miles off of its flying range.
Oh, that seems like a lot.
Just a tiny bit. And so it ended up not being enough to get the Minuteman over the North Pole to go hit its target somewhere in the Soviet Union. And so the Air Force goes, well, we could still use these if we move them up to Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. They were coming here anyway. It was really more when they got here is what was different. Because I think our elevation is 3,500 feet. So in a sense, that already took care of the 2,000 feet. Right? And then also 600 some odd miles north of Los Angeles proper. So they're already closer to the North Pole to get them over. So it was just kind of that technological problem is how they ended up here as the first Minuteman missile wing.
Interesting. I never really thought about why here beyond just space to start with. Interesting.
Well, and I'd heard the term Wing 1, but I
didn't know what that really meant.
And I only learned that one like a year and a half ago. I was like, why are we called Wing 1? This doesn't make any sense. But
it does. Now it does.
There is a historical reason why that is.
Yeah.
I've always assumed there's strategy behind everything that happens. But I
At
also
least
just
with the Air
choose
Force,
not to ask many questions. I mean, there's just an intimidation level when you're out on base visiting with people and you're like, we do this, and okay, I'm not going to ask anything further.
Yeah, and I appreciate you're bringing the lingo and abbreviations down to our civilian level too. Yes.
Well, I'm well practiced.
Yes, I bet. Yes. Yeah. So another, and I'm jumping all around.
No,
all around here. Another
surprise.
thing. I know, shocking. The Ace in the Hole, as it's called, is just right down the road from us.
What is that?
Yeah. Can you tell us more about that history?
I'm going to ruin everyone's day.
Oh, dear.
Oh,
no.
So I actually had
He's like, I don't know anything about it.
So I actually had this. So one of my favorite things is that whenever there's someone having a conversation, the biggest buzzkill historian can do is go, well, actually.
Well, actually, that's not true. Yeah.
So Ace in the Hole, right? So we'll talk about the actual launch facility, and then I'll talk about the whole Ace in the Hole bit.
Okay.
So Alpha 6 down south of Monarch, right?
Okay.
So that was the first.
Is that one of the locations?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Missile
So
locations.
Alpha
Yeah.
6
Okay.
is launch facility Alpha 6. And so that's south of Monarch. So you go zip, basically between Monarch and Nighthawk, right? So that was the first
That's pretty.
one to come online during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Okay.
And of course during that time period when it's kind of, well, it's always you build the plane while you fly. It doesn't quite apply, but like the Air Force is literally building the infrastructure for this weapon system as the Cuban Missile Crisis is happening.
Oh.
So if it's the first, though, why 6? Are you getting to that? Is that not pertinent to the story?
It is not.
Okay.
It's just the
Shut
just
up.
the number.
Actually, I'm not entirely certain why, because it's numbered so people can look on a map and go, oh, Alpha 6, I know where this is at. But why Alpha 6
Why
was
6?
brought on alert first, I actually do not know the answer to
Okay.
that. I really don't. It could have just been go, hey, that one.
Yeah.
You know, it could have
This
been
one's
that
the closest
simple.
already.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that usually the simple practical answer is probably the answer, and so it's pure speculation on my part here. But I think it was
You got
because it
enough
was.
background knowledge to make that assumption
Yeah.
valid.
It's
So.
an educated guess.
Now for the ace in the hole,
Yes.
and this is the thing that bursts everyone's bubble.
Okay.
So the 10th Missile Squadron, their motto is first ace in the hole, right? And that's a pretty common phrase, if you're playing cards,
Right.
Hey,
Ace in the
say,
hole, yeah.
full house, royal flush,
Yeah.
whatever it might be, right? And that's a phrase that you use when you kind of have something up your sleeve. But again, a card reference, right, to kind of put one over on whoever you're up against.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it's also a very, 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 very common phrase. And
Yes.
so
Uh-oh.
kind of military beat reporters back in the 60s were already referring to the Minuteman as the nation's ace in the hole long before we even started building the infrastructure out here. And on top of that, too, that 10th Missile Squadron going, hey, we're the ace in the hole because of the Cuban Missile Crisis is also incorrect because they'd submitted all their paperwork for their patch and their mottos before the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so there was a historian that was here, and he worked with somebody at U.S. Strategic Command at Offutt in Omaha, Nebraska, and they kind of chased down all of the myths in that, and they found no evidence that Kennedy used that phrase in relation to the wing in the 10th Missile Squadron here.
Okay, so we just kind of ran with it because
Yep.
isn't the sign?
Yeah, there's a sign
Isn't
that
there a
says
sign that
ace in the
says
hole.
ace in the hole?
It's
I
like-
thought what I thought you were gonna say is there's nothing there. It's just a pretty spot. Like
Like it's not
that
actually
is
a
just a decoy for people.
Well, the whole thing, too, with those launch facilities, right, is that once you see them and you know what they are, you cannot not see them throughout the entire,
thing. Yeah.
the 7 counties essentially around
Yeah.
Cascade. Yeah, you see them everywhere.
So this is a silly question. If I'm from here or not from here, and I'm driving and I start seeing them, I see Alpha 6. How close can I get to it?
I was just gonna
when
ask
will I
that.
get arrested or shot?
I
'Cause
don't
have
know,
a
but
follow-up story to that. So,
so I do not actually know, but I think that's a great experiment for you to do on
yeah.
your weekends.
Oh,
your
not
weekends
me.
off,
We'll
yeah.
send one of our tourists out to do that. Just kidding.
so there's a spot near the Utica area where there is where a missile lives. It's not well identified, but it's a nice gravel
Yeah.
road, and then there's an outhouse.
They usually aren't overly like, hey, look at me.
Not a huge sign like
Yeah.
Ace in the Hole is. Like
Yeah.
that's why I'm thinking there's nothing there.
Yeah.
But there is a blue room there outside the fenced perimeter, but it's yet behind a fence. And so we were out hunting, and my husband says to me, my loving current spouse says, you can use that to go to the bathroom. I'm
Oh
like,
no.
I don't think you can. He goes, no, they're put there for people to use. I'm like, I think they're put there for military personnel to use, not just for me to climb over a fence. That's your first indication. I have to
there's a
climb
fence?
over a fence to go use this thing. I don't think it's just available. I don't think the military puts that out there just for
Just
anyone to have at it.
For bathroom purposes.
Anytime you see what we call concertina wire, I would stay 30 to 40 feet away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will ruin, at the minimum, the rest of your day. It is
Yeah.
absolutely horrible. yeah.
Well, people will show up quickly. You may not know that there's people there. They are.
There's always
There's
someone
They're
always
close.
someone there.
Always someone
Yeah.
watching.
They're close in the vicinity, so don't use the blue rooms next to the missile.
I don't even know what
sites.
you're talking about.
A portable outhouse?
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's like blue room. I get it now.
That's a term.
I get it.
Right?
Mhm.
I get it. The
Sure,
porta
we'll
potty.
go with
yeah.
that. We'll go
Oh,
with that.
see,
Well,
Dr. Troy hasn't heard of it either.
there's a lot of things I say people have never heard of before.
Yeah. This is true. Okay, so don't use the blue rooms or any. Just don't go near them.
No.
Yeah.
Unless you really want to test and then be a guest on our podcast and tell us what the experience was
What
like.
not to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd also end up in one of the Wings histories in which I chronicled that entire event, by the way.
Hey, we'll
Yeah.
give you some new stories.
There you go.
Yes.
It's been slow. Dog days of summer.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so that's the ace in the hole is more
Mhm.
just a
Myth.
myth.
Yeah.
And
Not that it's a thing, because it's clearly named that, but
Yeah.
kind of how that came to be.
How that name came.
But
to
you're
be.
right, though, right? Is that once it's on a roadside sign,
Yeah.
it is official.
Yeah.
You know, and it is.
People
The
cling
place,
to that.
Like, I want to
claim
stop
that.
and take a picture. I
Mhm.
was at the Ace in the Hole.
Mhm.
Can you do that there?
No.
No, that's a Montana DOT sign. Yeah, so that's a good half mile probably from when you actually get to Alpha
Okay.
6. Yeah. So
So-
you would pull over. It's
You can get a picture with the
Yeah.
sign.
Well, that's good.
my friend John Axeline. I don't know if he's retired or not, but he's the historian for the Department of Transportation. So
Uh-huh.
he does. I don't know if he wrote that one specifically, but he works in a lot of those roadside marker. It's part of his job. so.
Okay. I did not know
Mhm.
DOT had their own historian.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite the same as what I do. I think he does a lot of cultural resource management and kind of
Sure.
all,
Okay.
all that stuff. Where
Yeah.
we're going to build this, we got to make sure that it complies with X, Y, and Z and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I could be wrong, and he can send you all a nasty
He
email,
can-
or
he
he'll
can-
send me a
he
nasty
can
email. yeah.
correct. We'll make
You know,
a
we
correction.
say it on here, it becomes true, in fact. That's
First
all
Ace in
that
the Hole.
matters.
Yeah. That's what I will name this episode. Maybe I will, because then people will click on it.
Yeah.
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 They'll get
Then
to
we'll
know.
debunk
Mhm.
the myth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at Malmstrom Air Force Base, there's a lot of planes on display.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people that all of those planes at one point were part of a mission out there. How erroneous is that statement?
It's at least half wrong.
Oh, see, not bad.
She sees that as half right. So.
Exactly. Actually, I'm not entirely certain. So Rob, he's a better one to ask that one because he owns the air park. My understanding is that what we have on display there have been on the base at some point in time.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not necessarily connected to a mission.
Well, I mean, if they were on base, then they would have been based out of here, and so that's
Used
probably
in
all
some
the connection
capacity.
you needed to do that. Yeah.
To put that up there. Yep.
Mhm.
So I'd say mostly right.
She's really clinging to that.
Grasping at straws here.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's what I do. I've made my whole career out of it.
So we kind of jumped from World War II to Cold War era. Obviously, there's a lot in between there.
Not really. World War II to Cold War.
Yeah, right there. So what growth? What kind of happened with the base? There was a lot that, I believe, if I'm remembering from my readings of your articles correctly, that there was a lot that had to do with keeping economic development or growth happening. That a lot of people, through some rough times, were trying to keep the jobs and keep the base going and keep it here.
Yes, so this is actually something that it's not unique to Malmstrom Air Force Base in Great Falls. So for better or for worse, and you really see this in the Cold War when the DoD goes, hey, we're going to shut down 30% of our military installations,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't need them anymore. And
For real shut down or just pretend shut
no,
down?
shut down.
Okay.
I mean, have y'all seen the Woodstock '99 documentary on Netflix
Oh
yet?
no.
No.
So that entire concert took place at a then shuttered after the Cold War Air Force Base up in I think north central New York State.
Oh.
And so you actually saw this all over the nation.
Yeah.
And so what you end up having with military towns, and I've been to enough of them that Great Falls does not have the feel of a military town. To me, it doesn't. Like
No,
going.
a lot of people are surprised we have
Yeah.
an air base
Yeah.
here.
You spend any time at Fort Bragg, and you're like, oh no, I don't want this. But here, I mean, at least now there's a level, I think, of diversification of the economy, right? Versus at the end of the '90s, because you had the Black Eagle smelter go down in the early '80s. So I don't know exactly how many people employed, but I understand it was a major economic hit.
Huge.
That the city and the county and then the ripple effects would pretty much felt all the way up into the '90s. So when the Cold War ends and the DoD goes, all right, let's start shutting stuff down. What do we not need? And then, making all these decisions, right, that you had, and this goes back to kind of city boosters, your Chamber of Commerce folks, but really anybody who had any financial or economic stake in that base's existence were really fighting to keep, first priority, the base open, and the second priority as many missions as possible. Because in 1995, there was a flying mission out there. It was an air refueling wing, but it had already been downsized in 93. So by 95, the Air Force is like, all right, get it out of here. Go to Florida. And so in the span of about 3-4 years, I'm trying to think what are the numbers. You had at least 1,000 military and civilian jobs go somewhere else, right?
Wow.
And so even if your business doesn't directly make money from like renovating dormitories or doing asphalt work on the base, right, those 1,000 people spend money in town. Right, and so the ripple effect. So there was a lot of fighting to keep as much of the base mission, the base open, and the missions, as many of the missions as possible, for a lot of that economic reason. And because the smelter had shut down in the early 80s, right, this was, I don't know enough about Great Falls during the 90s, but it wasn't, you didn't have the diversification that seemed to rebound that you do with a lot of the medical stuff here. And so it was something when Malmstrom Air Force Base accompanied something like, it was like 33 or 43% of the county's economy. Show me a place that can survive that.
Right.
Right. I mean, that's pretty gnarly. Yeah.
To go full nerd on you, we received a lot of EDA funding to do a full diversification study when we used to have 4 missiles. 3 were alike, 1 was an oddball, and they shut down the one oddball, and we had to look at what is this going to do, what can we bring in, what can we do to continue to keep the economy going, because it's a huge issue. So that
was the 564th Missile Squadron, basically kind of around Conrad in that area.
Yeah,
they called it the Odd Squad because it was a different weapons manufacturer that made it, had different communication systems. And it forced the base to kind of keep 2 different maintenance trainers and then also missileer trainer stuff. So it was kind of like, we're burning money here, keeping this thing going. And there was going to be another downsizing in the nuclear weapons force anyways. So that was a pretty easy, just, all right, chop it off, at least from the Air Force's perspective.
So Troy, tell us the story about how it became Malmstrom Air Force Base, because it wasn't always Malmstrom Air Force Base. Well, maybe that's separate than the 341st, obviously, and you don't know. If you don't know, I can tell you my story.
No. So I literally finished writing up a short little thing on what happened with that, and so it's not the most exciting of stories, but it was.
It's not really.
No. So,
but it's part of the history.
Yes. And so it's named. The base is named after Colonel Einar Malmstrom. And he was a 407th Strategic Fighter Wings deputy commander. And so he had a pretty storied career, which you would have to have a base named after you, right?
Right.
Like,
you'd think you'd have to be some type of a big deal.
Yeah. And this actually gets back to the initial effort in 49 to try to come up with a name that wasn't Great Falls Air Force Base, is that all the names that came forward were essentially, they met some of the criteria, but they was a Corporal Donald Meager. He was a Great Falls High School graduate. He died at Hickam Airfield in Hawaii during Pearl Harbor, and so during the attack on Pearl Harbor. So a valorous action, but he was a corporal. He had 2 years, in the Army Air Forces, and so a lot of the names that came forward didn't have the length of a career to make much of an impact on the institution that was the Army Air Forces, or the Air Force once it became that. But Colonel Einar Malmstrom did. So he died in August of 54, just the other side of the airport. And the investigators, what they suspect happened, he had a stroke or heart attack while flying and crashes.
Oh.
Yeah. So he took off, I forget the exact time, he took off like at 8:41 in the morning, and 6 minutes later his plane was in rubble.
Oh my gosh.
And when they actually went and investigated the crash site, they could tell that there's no effort made to actually try to eject from the cockpit.
Oh.
So which leads them to believe that he had some sort of catastrophic medical event to where he was unable to do that.
Yeah.
And so, but as that was happening, right, the paperwork had already been submitted by the wing to name it Oughton Air Force Base after Brigadier General Jesse Oughton. And so he was he had a very similar career to Einar Malmstrom, and he was in fighter jets, but he had no association with Great Falls and Great Falls Air Force Base at the time. And so when Einar Malmstrom crashes and dies, everyone's like, whoa, him. Stop the paperwork.
That name.
Refile it. It's going to be named after him, and that's essentially what happened.
Wow. So we were almost, what was the other one?
Auten Air Force Base.
Auten
If
Air
I'm
Force
saying
Base.
it, it's Auton.
Okay.
I read it as Auten.
Like,
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
So it was close to that. So had Einar Malmstrom not died when he did or
Yeah.
never got here, there very well could be Auten Air Force Base. Yeah.
Interesting.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
There's a picture of whatever his classification is, Malmstrom, in the Malmstrom Air Force Base Museum, so you get to see what he looks like.
And I think that was
cool.
actually commissioned after his death as a bit of a memorial. Because I was going through newspapers and there was talks about the unveiling of the Malmstrom portrait, and then his wife got a much small, because it's a really big portrait, right? So
It's
got like
big.
a half-size one that she'd take home and put on her wall.
Okay.
And I think it was in Indianapolis.
Could you imagine that conversation? Like, that's a nice one. It's a little too big. Could you do
Can
something
do
smaller
a smaller
for me?
one for my
hus-
home? Yeah.
I don't want his
It
figure
doesn't need
that
to be
big.
a life-size figure. Yeah. So speaking of, there is a museum on Malmstrom Air Force Base that the public can go and see. What all can people learn when they go to that museum?
So you have the air park. And so there are display aircraft that I believe have had a mission there.
Have something to
They've
do with the
all
base.
been at Malmstrom Air Force Base
Right.
at some point.
Again, you have to ask Rob because he will yell at me if he hears this.
Don't ask Rebecca.
And actually, just this summer, I think 3 of those displays were repainted. So the 2 Minutemen. And then the big air refueling tanker, just the big massive aircraft, got a new paint job, so that should look really good. And then inside the museum, there's a bunch of different stuff. So you have a big, massive model airplane collection, and the other half of it is at the airport.
That's all part of the same
yeah,
collection.
it's just part of the same. My understanding is it's part of the same collection.
Yeah.
And it actually is pretty cool because you can see tons of different types of aircraft. There's a small display that kind of tells a little bit of the World War II story here on base. And then it pretty quickly gets into the ICBM mission. And probably one of the big displays is there's a Minuteman II console, so where the missileers would sit. And you kind of get a sense of what their workstation looks like in the launch control centers underground.
Very cool. And that's, maybe you don't know all the details to this, but the public wants to go on. That's an appointment-based thing, because we get people who come who want to go on to the
They
base.
want to visit Malmstrom Air
and like
Force
you
Base.
can't do that.
Well, I think, again, this is something clear with Rob, because I think part of it was appointment because of COVID,
Yeah,
right? So
sure.
we kind of started opening back up and letting people back on. I think that was part of it. The other part is if you don't have a DOD retiree card or an active duty card or have my civilian equivalent, right? You'll have to go through security, which it doesn't really take much. They kind of write your information down. But if he knows people are coming ahead of time, he can get that
help
control
you with
center.
that process
yeah,
more.
where it's a little bit quicker, so you don't necessarily have to wait around for however long it is to process. Because sometimes there's no one there. Sometimes there's 30 people that are trying to get in.
Yeah.
And it's just you don't know till you show up.
Yeah. And is it right? Our Canadian friends can't go on, correct? You have to be an American
Not currently.
citizen.
Correct.
I do not know.
Okay.
No foreigners.
Well, you get to be the expert for a moment.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know how long that's going to last,
Well,
but
time's
currently,
passed.
currently
Yeah.
no foreigners allowed.
Yeah. But you can go.
Which is, I got to tell you this funny story. We had this great couple in the office talking about going to Malmstrom Air Force Base, and they were from Canada, but he was of Japanese descent.
Oh.
And so when we wwere talking, he's like, there's a museum at Malmstrom Air Force Base. I said, there is, but you are not allowed out there. And he's like, what's wrong with my kind? And I'm like, and I started laughing, and he was joking.
He's making a joke of it.
And I said, well, we don't like Canadians out there. And he's like, oh, Japanese are fine. I'm like,
like,
if you're born
American
in the U.S., you were fine.
citizen, yes.
But yeah,
they were a
so
funny
that's
couple.
a current
Yeah.
situation out there.
Yeah.
And that's all I know about that.
Yeah. But you can learn, you can go on and if
Yeah.
you're American
Learn some
citizen,
stuff.
go on and learn.
And Rob's a
more on
wealth
that
of
base.
knowledge too. I
Yeah.
mean, he's got a whole spiel on the front and the back end and stuff. And so if you actually are able to schedule And he can kind of set that up and give you a really good, spiel on the front end, and then kind of walk you through depending on how busy the museum is.
Yeah. So as a historian, you don't create displays at the museum?
Well, no. So
you just write papers?
More or less. So what's interesting, right, is that for the Air Force History Museum program, so every wing in the Air Force has a historian position. Now, whether or not it's filled is up for, that varies. And then kind of the different echelons up. So like numbered air forces, so ours is based out of F.E. Warren and Cheyenne. There's a historian position there, and then you go up higher, and some are big offices of 5 or 6 people, some are 2 people offices, stuff like that. If we didn't have a museum on base, I would probably be doing a lot more museum type stuff.
Okay.
And so it's one of those things when I talk to other historians that do not have that, they do a lot of that stuff. So they're probably doing, and it's kind of one of those things that their base or their wings kind of buildings is kind of their museum. And so they work, I've talked to a bunch of folks who's like, oh yeah, I did this one over in the education center about the history of the education program. And then here in the command center, they wanted this kind of your standard, then there was the Air Force and then blah, 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 and do a lot of stuff like that. I did have an opportunity this year. I worked with Alex Stevenson in Public Affairs, and we created essentially a museum-type display in the hallway that leads to the Wing Command Suite. And so we did our best to try to capture the history of the missile wing, kind of from a narrative standpoint, from the stuff I'd researched and write. And then he actually found, it's pretty cool, a clock, and he has it set to the date and the time when the first Minuteman ICBM came on alert, and it's at like 59 years,
Cool.
so-and-so months, so many days, months,
Yeah.
minutes, and it keeps rolling up. It's a pretty cool display.
That is cool.
So I was actually happy to have an opportunity to work on something like that, because I really haven't been able to since I've been here, because it just wasn't asked for or needed, because Rob does a lot of that kind of the public history stuff. Yeah.
So one of the cool things that I think, well, I don't think it is the coolest thing, I think. We had the Berlin Airlift Veteran training happen here. And that was that I'm just going to use terms that I have no idea what they mean.
Go for it.
Was that a mission here?
Yeah, so there is in the basically from, so that was I think that was in 48. So from basically the end of World War II up until the Minuteman, there's a lot of different units and missions coming in and out of now Malmstrom Air Force Base. So many so that I've intentionally not looked in researching that time period because it's so complicated. And so it was a part of a mission here, and I've only looked a little bit into it, mostly because I don't really have a lot of sources to work with. But my understanding is the reason that mission got here, and it was only in operation 6 months or something like that, but every 30 days they replace something like 13% of the Berlin Airlift Air crews in Germany, right? And so that mission's burning through pilots and air crews. And so a lot of stuff, it was both like, these terms I'm not good with. So kind of like the magnetic approach, magnetic compass. I forget what it is. Something with actual directional stuff the pilots used to fly was similar to that in Germany. The terrain was similar. The weather was similar. And so they were actually kind of training in similar conditions. So it's a lot different to go be trained to fly in Phoenix, and then all of a sudden you're in cold, north central Germany, and going, well, my plane doesn't handle the same way because it's so cold, right? And so, and my understanding too, at some point on the runway, the training outfit there that did that, they actually kind of erected a skyline so that the air crews could practice flying over and into Berlin, because they needed something that would obstruct, so they have to practice flying over buildings and stuff like that to get into Berlin, either to land or to drop stuff on the eastern side. So,
Troy, if you ever want me to hook you up with some of the Berlin Airlift veterans, I can do that.
Okay.
I'm not connected. I got to hang out with them. They were here for their reunion. So a lot of them were here for the first time since they were stationed here, if that's the correct term. And the stories they would tell, oh my gosh. And then I felt like a worthless human being because these 90-year-old men are matching me pace step for step all day long. We're touring this entire community as to how they want to put this conference together for their people. And this 93-year-old man says to me, he's like, well, we better get you home and put you to bed. It's been a big day. And I looked at him, I'm like, I can still go, old man. I'm ready to drink all night long. And I'm like, don't make me feel worse that I can't keep up with you. But the stories he told, it was fun to hear history from the person who created it, because it's a lot better than when you read it in a book.
Well, and that's actually one of the things. So I get to do a lot of oral history interviews, and so a lot of stuff I research and write are like the stuff I sent you, so things that happened back in the 40s and the 60s and the 90s. But also a lot of stuff I do is very like immediate events. So like I wrote a history of our public health response during the COVID-19 pandemic. So what did we do from a public health standpoint, and how did it operate? You know, what were the challenges? You know, how did the medical group try to address them? All this kind of stuff. And so I get to do a lot of oral history interviews because there's only so much memorandums and emails and stuff will tell you. Sometimes like I need to talk to the person who ran the COVID-19 testing line at our clinic, right? And so how did this actually work? Because it's not entirely clear. But for the Cuban Missile Crisis one I did, so I got an opportunity. And this project actually started with this guy. So he to my knowledge, he still lives here in town. He's still alive. He was like 88, I think, when I interviewed him. And he was telling, so he worked not as a uniform guy, but as a civilian contractor who was responsible for quality control for all the communication cable that is spread. I mean, all throughout central Montana. I'm trying to get an idea of exactly how many miles.
Again,
it's a lot.
His own article, which is awesome.
It's a lot. Hold on, it's coming. It's an absurd.
I've done a research paper one time, and then I read it later, and I'm like, God, I used to be smart. Like that's what happens to me. I'm like, how did I do this?
Yeah.
There it is, 2,100 miles of communication table throughout central Montana. And so he was sharp as a whip. And so, is that the right word? Sharp as a whip? That's not right. Sharp as attack. Sharp as attack.
Quick as a whip.
Quick as a whip.
It sounded right to me.
It did sound right until we saw, and I was like, well, I guess maybe that doesn't make sense.
Don't think too much.
Okay.
Just keep going.
So he was actually able to walk me through and talk. Well, here's what we did. You know, here's how this part of the operation, blah blah blah. But he's also telling me stories. So he was based out of Lewistown for pretty much the length of that project, and so he was like, yeah. So you know, we'd work 12-hour days. And, you know, when we got done for the day, you know, they'd go into the airfield in Lewistown, and that's kind of where their office was, and go, all right, you team of X number of folks, you're going out here today, out by Hobson or whatever it is. And then, you know, and so they got working, and then whatever the closest town was, they'd go and get dinner, have some beers. You know, if it was a Friday, maybe they have a lot of beers, right? And so he's telling me this story where he's in Hobson, and he told me the name of the bar. I have it on the oral history interview. I can't remember off the top of my head. But he was complaining about this loudmouth Texan that had came up and was working on the project and just kept running his mouth. And he's like, I just hated this guy. And so he ended up getting in a fight in Hobson, right, where I don't know if he got the pool cue and smacked it up his head or cracked him in the face with the cue ball or something like that. Yeah. But he ended up, I think he swung and he missed, and then the guy's friends jumped him, threw him out of the bar, right? And it's like January too, so it's snowing, it's cold, all this kind of stuff. So he's all angry and stuff. And he actually showed me a photograph the day after, and like you couldn't even recognize him. It was such a massive black eye. And so then he was like, well, I go back to Lewistown. I'm going to go to the Mint Bar. I bet that SOB is still there. He tracks him down in Lewistown, and they continue the fight into the night.
Oh, my gosh.
So they get back into another fight in Lewistown.
Wow. Apparently they were not finished with that fight.
Well,
Some fights are just days and days and days.
I thought that's when men fought. They just fought, and then they were done.
No, he's like, I bet he's at the Mint Bar. I'm going to go. I'm going to give you that SOB. I'm going to go tell him what's what again.
Oh, my gosh.
So it's being able to do oral history interviews like that, that doesn't always happen, right?
No.
But a lot of people have some interesting stories that pop up, and I'm kind of like, ha!
Well, and it's, for me, you never expect someone who's doing the Berlin airlift or being on this strategic portion of a mission having a beer. But they're normal humans.
Right.
All normal humans, I shouldn't say it that way, but people will have a beer. So it's, the gentleman I visited with was telling me about a time he'd snuck to the bar in Germany and was drinking beer and then got kicked out.
Oh.
Or someone was coming in, he had to run out the back door, and then ended up having to fly some dog food in like the next morning.
Yeah.
Not 100%. And he's like, thank God it was just dog food. But he also said like
Lower
he'd never
pressure.
missed a landing. So
Yeah.
Wow.
because if you miss a landing, you just keep going. Like
Yeah.
you don't get to retry because it's every 3 seconds they were landing a plane.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's-
So I just kind of sat there. I'm like, tell me more stories about
Yeah.
you drinking and having to fly dog food. Like,
Yeah.
those are things that don't show up in the history book.
No. And
And the things
it's
you don't
not
think
quite
of.
the same. Also, it's different reading it than
Yeah.
hearing it from their mouth too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the guy. I'm like, but you're 93. I haven't always been 93.
Like,
True.
yeah, I guess that's true.
I was in my
yeah.
20s at one point.
Yeah.
I did stupid stuff too.
Yeah.
Like I'm still doing stupid stuff.
So, Troy, you also you work in the civilian side of things now, but you were also in the Air Force as well.
No.
Correct,
So
or
I was in the Army.
in the Army.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the joke I tell is that
better
I'm an
branch.
Air Force civilian who served in the Army, and his first Air Force unit didn't have any planes. So my position also deploys, and
Oh,
so
okay.
if I have to go to the Air Operations Center in Qatar or something, was it Qatar?
Guitar. I
Or is
just
it-
heard it.
Abu Dhabi, I can't remember.
I just heard it on the radio today.
Qatar, yeah, in Qatar.
Guitar. Guitar.
But I'd end up
I'm not going to get involved in this. Just let you both keep repeating it over and over.
Qatar. But I would end
That'll
up.
be our whole episode.
I don't know anything about airplanes,
Yeah.
so they're gonna get there and be like, "This guy sucks."
Yeah.
Why did they
Air
send him?
Force. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, so your position as historian
Gets
deploys.
deployed.
It's deployable.
Okay.
And so my friend, he's the 20th Air Force historian. He did 6 months in Kabul as the Air Force historian. This was
gosh.
back in, when was it? 18, I think it's 2017.
Okay.
I think it was.
But you don't really have to be a
Interesting.
smart person in airplanes to know to do history.
No, but it helps to know the lingo and what kind of airplane is that? Is
Yeah,
that- and
to
then
know
goes, "What?"
immediately.
You
Yeah.
don't- yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, there is that level of prominence, I will say, when you don't know what the plane is.
Mhm.
Like, look at that plane. Like when we had the air show
Oh,
and I'm
yeah.
walking around, I'm like, let's go look at that plane. And my husband's like, it's whatever the name of the plane
Blah,
is.
blah,
I'm
blah,
like,
yeah.
Mhm.
that's
Okay.
lost on me. I don't
Yeah.
care what the name of it is. Let's just go
Mhm.
look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Have you been deployed in
No,
this position?
No, not
before?
yet.
Okay.
I was due up, but I was also dealing with the back issue
Okay.
thanks to the Army. And so I'll get cycled back through. I wouldn't be surprised if I get tagged for something in the next couple of years.
Okay.
They already told me as much. So
Yeah,
there's-
yeah.
you'll pop back up. You're just going to get cycled back through.
When you get deployed for
Mm-hmm.
this position, is it similar to serving kind of as a journalist at the
Oh.
time when you're there? Or what does that look like?
It's
Do you know?
literally doing the same job here
Okay.
there.
Are you following people around at the time? Are you out? Are you?
How do you pick your subject matter?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I'd pick it kind of this. Well, a lot of times it helps when some colonel or general goes, "Do this." I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's
Yeah.
easy. I don't have to think
That's
about
the
it.
assignment. Yeah.
But for me here, a lot of what I say I choose to cover, and it's one of those things. I'm the only person there doing this, so if I'm looking over here, I'm not looking over there,
Yeah.
right? And so a lot of it is I attend a lot of meetings. I read every piece of email that I get. I always try to get access to my commander's emails. No one's ever done that before, but I keep asking for it.
Uh-huh.
And just kind of say, well, what are people talking about? What do I know are the big things that are happening?
Yeah.
And then I go after that information, and then as stuff pops up, I'm like, okay, well, now I'm over here, you
Yeah.
know? And so there's a lot of kind of herding cats type thing with it.
So you are working as much in the present as you
Yeah.
are
Correct.
in the past.
Yeah,
as
so
a
I'm
historian.
trying to chronicle everything the wing does from January 1st through to December 31st.
So you're researching, but also
Yeah.
in charge of recording
Correct.
what's happening
Correct,
now.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is
No big deal. Wow. Jeez.
It's
I
so-
wonder if my incident got chronicled.
Going to the blue room.
No.
Oh, believe me, if you approached that, I would have got an email. It wouldn't have said you by name, but I've been like,
Oh, you're like, I know who
I've
this
met
is.
this woman before.
Yeah.
This does not surprise
"Was she going after
me.
the porta potty?" So
That is not for hunters. Oh my
I
goodness.
knew it wasn't. I think he was just trying
Robert
to get
was
me
just trying to get you.
detained.
He just wanted a night to himself.
I
Get you in
guess.
jail for a
Didn't want
night.
me to be around. No, I was talking about the incident where I went to the visitor information center to get on base, and they were in some special Bravo formation, and I got kicked out. And my sponsor got mad at the people. I'm like, don't get mad at the people. He's like, I can do whatever I want. I'm like, I think they're just doing their job.
Probably.
And then I got on base, and I was told never to leave the room I was in. I'm like, not a problem.
Yeah, like I'm good.
Was that the active shooter a couple years ago?
No, this was quite a while ago. Hostage negotiation, something going on.
Mm-hmm.
But they just
Training
kept you.
or real?
No.
So one of the things happened. So in my experience, there was an active shooter. It was in the news.
Yeah.
This would have been in 19, I think it was.
Yeah.
And across my computer, big red flashing lights, active shooter on base. Here's the building. Shut your door. Get under your desk. I mean, lock down. I'm like,
Yeah.
lock the door.
Yeah.
You know, and it was, but it was in the middle of an exercise. And the second that happened, I'm like, someone did not say exercise, exercise, exercise. We have an
Yeah.
active shooter
Oh
at
my
building,
gosh.
whatever it was. And that's exactly what happened.
Ugh.
Because they went back, it's like, do you mean exercise? They're like, no. I was like, okay. So then
Yeah.
the tactical response force comes out, and they go from real world, the exercise to, this is real. And
Yeah.
they're busting in windows and busting open doors. They're pulling people out of the building. It was.
I seem to recall I was working in news in 2019, and I seem to, now that you're saying that, because I was like, I do not remember an active shooter. I should remember that, but it was that situation. Okay.
Because my wife, now girlfriend at the time, she calls my office going, what's happening?
Are you okay?
Because she saw it on the news.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll call you back.
Yeah.
I'm okay. I'll call you
I'm
back.
alive. I'll
Everything's
call
fine.
you back. Yeah.
Nothing out of the norm here
Yeah.
today, honey.
Yeah.
No, mine was, I think, some type of hostage negotiation training. It was a training.
Okay.
But, when you get into that world, they use words that you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I just do as I'm told.
Yeah.
Because I'm not I'm a guest in that environment.
Yeah,
so.
it's a totally different world. when
Yeah,
you're
so
there.
they're like,
yeah.
ma'am, you can't be in here. We're in Bravo formation. I'm like,
You're like, what does Bravo formation mean?
Super. So I'll
Yeah.
go stand outside.
Yeah.
Can I stand outside? Like,
Yeah.
can I be close to the building?
Right. Yeah.
So, it was an interesting training.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got on base, and I was told not to leave the room. It was fine.
Thankfully, you knew from the start it was an exercise.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of times,
Still.
too, you'll see there'll be exercise plastered all over the entrances
Yeah.
and stuff. So if you're not kind of, if you don't work on
Familiar.
base or live on base and you're not familiar with it, you'll go, well, at least hopefully. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a big sign up that said it's B. I don't know what was going on.
Mhm.
I'm just like, hey.
No
They're like,
clue.
you can't be in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, where should I go so I don't
I'll just go stand
be
outside.
part of the exercise? Yeah. So at Malmstrom, so it's the 341st Missile Wing at Malmstrom Air Force Base. There's also then the Red Horse Squadron. What is the Red Horse? What does that mean? There's also
let
a big.
me reference the
Let
thing
me
I
reference
wrote.
my article.
Let me reference my own stuff here. Hold on.
Because there's a big red horse statue up there. And I think, like, now that I've been in the community a while and I'm learning more about the military, I understand, like, the Red Horse Squadron is part of the 341st Missile Wing, which is the Malmstrom Air Force Base, which is this, but there's a lot of layers.
So the Red Horse Squadron. So Red Horse stands for Rapid Engineer Deployable Heavy Operation Repair Squadron Engineer.
Oh, I didn't know the whole thing. Well, of
Of
course it
course
does.
it
It's the
stands for
military. Yeah,
something.
Yeah.
of course it does.
So actually, so it got to the base, I think, was it fiscal year 98, and it was one of the missions that at least congressional representatives for the state of Montana tried to get to replace some of that had lost, right? So
Okay.
it could have easily just gone to some other base, but for whatever
Yeah.
reason, it showed up here. And it is actually what we call a tenant unit. So it belongs. So the 341st Missile Wing belongs to Air Force Global Strike Command, and that is the command that does all of the nuclear weapons in world and stuff like that. And so the 341st Missile Wing is the host unit, and the squadron is a tenant unit, which really what that means is they just take care of themselves in a sense.
Okay.
And then the wing does all the other stuff. So all your mission support, so your personnel items, your
morale, what we call MW. Well, I always call it MWR. So think of it
I don't know what that
recreation.
means,
Yeah, recreation. All of the medical stuff. The 341st Medical Group that belongs to the wing takes care of, but because they're on base, they then go see those providers and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the Red Horse. So is everybody on base who is not a civilian? Are they part of the Red Horse Squadron, or is that its own separate?
It is its own thing. So it actually
Separate thing,
it
right?
belongs to Air Combat Command.
Okay.
So that is your fighter jets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know why it belongs to them. It just does.
Okay.
The Pentagon said, put them there. And so they did.
Okay. We'll
I'm
take
sure.
it.
I'm sure
we'll
there's a
take it.
reason. There's
Right.
obviously a reason for it, but
Nope,
they belong
no
to Air-
reason
take
at
it,
all.
So they belong to Air
This
Combat
is how it
Command, yeah.
happened.
And they're usually, I feel like those are the ones, at least that I seem to recall hearing, that get deployed more. Or it's typically the Red Horse Squadron that gets deployed.
Yeah, so
Okay.
they rotate a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, the third word is deployable.
Aha.
So
there you
it's
go.
just built into the title.
The
Well-
D in Red Horse is deployable. Okay.
It should just be deployed, because I've worked with a lot of Red Horse spouses, and those guys are gone a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's a family at the end of my street where I live, and he's a Red Horse because he wears the red hats. So
there you go.
The uniform and the red hats. So.
Okay.
They're
Yeah,
easy
so-
to spot,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
like we know.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
So
we're
here's one
pretending
for
we know.
you.
Yeah.
Do y'all want some new stuff?
Yes.
All
Tell
right.
us,
So-
I mean, it's really your episode. Tell us what you want. Tell us
So-
what
so
you
I
want
can
We're
to
under
think-
about.
mercy here.
So I'm assuming y'all know Ken Robeson.
I do.
Yes.
So I kind of thank him because he's done some history of Great Falls, Black residents, and he's written one chapter, one book chapter, one article about the Ozark Club.
Yes.
And so I'd actually talk to him, trying to figure out, well, what else is there that I could kind of build upon.
Yeah.
And so I ended up writing kind of a civil rights history of Great Falls with the base at the center of the
Ooh.
story.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it is currently, and I'll leave you the draft. Well, actually, I won't leave draft copy because I haven't been.
But it's
told I can do-
unclassified. It says it right
yeah,
there
but
on
it says
the paper.
draft right there. It says draft.
I can read through the gray.
Yeah. And so when I got this job, I ended up. So what ended up happening is I'd have folks come and asking me about this and that, and I couldn't answer the question because I didn't know. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a historian. I can find out.
Yeah. Amazing. Resource.
And so what I ended up doing, I went through and I kind of identified time periods and then a story that kind of correlates with that block of time. So the World War II one, there's a 1950s that has to do with the Building 500. So it used to be a big radar system. That's the one that's really complicated that I keep putting off. I did the missiles, right? And I did the end of the Cold War, and then I did kind of a civil rights story. And I actually I started this, and then I put it aside for about a year and a half because I couldn't find source material to do the rest, right? Because it's only about Great Falls. I can't make this about Montana because I'm doing it on the clock, and so the story has to touch the base somehow, right? Or the wing.
Yeah.
And so I finally solved my problem. And it was Control F at newspapers.com. and so I ended up being able to tell the story about, well, what does civil rights activism look like in Great Falls and what role did the base play? And so when Truman desegregated the military in 1948, you would have probably had something like, 100, maybe 200 black airmen on base. And then in very short order, you had thousands on base. And this was a place which was not dissimilar in kind of racial attitudes as you would have down south, that a lot of Great Falls residents weren't too happy to have this influx of black airmen in the city. And so what you end up happening is two things. First off, the base leadership is actually very proactive in trying to get out there and kind of do the PR stuff going, hey, listen, these airmen have money to spend. Let them come to your establishments. They're serving the nation, all that kind of stuff. But here comes Alma Jacobs, right? She's involved in this, and so she's a member of the Dunbar Art and Study Club. It was a branch of the Montana Federation of Colored Women's Clubs, and that was an organization that started in the early 20s to basically kind of be a community organization for Montana's black residents. It started in Butte, and then kind of all the bigger cities ended up with chapters, and so they took it upon themselves to start lobbying state legislators to get some sort of anti-discrimination legislation passed in the State House. So they started in 51. By 55, they're finally able to get something through. And what ends up happening with this one, unfortunately, is that it's kind of more of a declaration of principles going, Montana will not tolerate this. There's no enforcement mechanism.
Oh.
Right. So you could just keep on doing it, and you're not
even though we don't like it.
Exactly right.
No.
And so, I mean, that was a political consideration that the legislators had to take into consideration. So pretty much the Great Falls' delegation was on board, and I think everybody, both senators and representatives, voted in favor of it. But it narrowly got through. But they kind of had to water it down to get something through. And so we fast forward. Right, so because there's no enforcement mechanism, right, you still have rampant discrimination towards black airmen and their families in town, refusing to rent rentals and apartments to people, just ceaseless harassment in stores. Hey, you can't come here, right? You're black, we do not want you in our establishment, right? So this keeps on going through at least the 70s, and so in 1967. You have Geraldine Travis. So she moves here with her husband, and her husband ends up retiring out of here, but she gets involved in civil rights activism the second her feet hit the ground. So she's integral in starting the state's first, and to my knowledge, only chapter of the NAACP was here in Great Falls, Montana.
Oh, wow.
And it serviced other members and black residents in North, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Idaho, and Montana. So it was the only chapter, kind of at least in the 60s and 70s, for the services entire region. And a lot of airmen were a lot of the people that really got it to go. They did a lot of the legwork, and they populated the roles and stuff like that. But she ended up parlaying this early activism to becoming Montana's first, and I think only black legislator. So she's elected to the Montana State House in 75. She serves in 76, and her constituency is Malmstrom Air Force Base. And so it's an interesting thing that not necessarily how she gets elected, but you essentially, because most folks are registered to vote elsewhere and wherever their home of record is. So she pretty much had to convince 37 people to vote for her, and she goes to the State House. And so she only serves one term. She ends up losing the next term, and then she runs two more times. By the early 80s, the state reapportions the district and cuts Malmstrom up because what you end up having is 100 people electing a representative to serve 6,000. And they're like, people are not very happy about this. And so a lot of people in the State House and stuff knew that. But she was a really interesting character, and she was here until, I think, 89, and she moved to Phoenix with her daughter. I think she's still alive. Ken said she's still alive. I tried to call her to do an interview, but I didn't get a response. I'll try again. Because I know when I call, it says federal government on the ID. And so most people are like,
no thanks.
Well, even when we call, when Shannon's like, hey, want to do a podcast? Nobody answers their phone.
Yeah.
I don't know why. We're a fun time.
So this is the new one. So,
that's the new article.
I'll try to get it published here in the next year or two. We'll
Next year or two? We already have a draft.
There's the draft right there.
Yeah, but it has to go through peer review, and I got to revise it. And it's got to go to page proofs.
Wow, we really got that. I feel honored, though. We got a
This is where breaking stuff happens, this podcast.
Actually, I think Ken is the only other person that's read this.
Really?
Yeah. So, big question then. How many people during that time were actually stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base?
I could never get a solid number because a lot of what I was relying on was actually the newspapers and not the records, because the records and like there has to be a historian there to write the history. And if there's not one, there isn't. And so it was kind of in the heyday. You would have had probably the equivalent of 2 wings. Not saying that there were 2 wings there, but it could have been upwards of, if you include like dependents and stuff like that, 8,000 people.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So
more
a
than I
lot bigger,
thought.
a lot bigger than what it is now.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot bigger. Yeah.
Well, we lost the odd squad.
Odd squad went away. Yeah. So since you kind of to wrap things up here, we were talking about the past, but you also focus on the here and now and recording what's happening. We have some things happening here with Malmstrom in the next near future here, the next couple of years, with the change in revamping our missiles. With Northrop Grumman coming in for that contract. What can you tell us, or what can we expect here in the near future with what we can see at
What
Malmstrom?
kind of paper are you writing about this?
Well, the one thing I can say for certain is that there is a new Minuteman. I think it's the Sentinel.
Yep.
That is coming to Malmstrom.
Okay.
But you already knew that.
Yeah, it was. I've heard it on the radio.
So
again, nothing breaking here.
Right.
So it's actually interesting, right? And this is actually how I felt during the COVID-19 pandemic, is that it's cool to be a historian during something that's quote-unquote historic.
Mm-hmm.
And so for, I keep wanting to say GBSD because that's what it was before it became Sentinel.
Yeah.
Is that
Ground-based strategic air defense.
deterrent.
Deterrent.
Dun, dun, dun. So close. So close.
Got the words. I just can never get them into order.
No, but the thing with this is that there's a lot of just what we call hurry up and wait.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot, I mean, like it's still being designed, and so it's I don't even know how long it's going to be before there's folks here to really seriously go, all right, let's start yanking stuff out of the ground.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of kind of fits and starts. So the most recent thing would have been the environmental impact statement meeting. So there's one here, there's one in Lewistown, and stuff like that. But that was there was a lot of coordination and stuff to that. That's done, and then now we wait. Until the next thing, and I honestly do not know what it is or when it is.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing about this is the interaction it has with the economy, like how much it takes a community effort to make this happen as much as a military effort. Because I know our friend Tracy Hauk, German, sorry Tracy if I ruined that last name for you. I'm just not used to it yet. Tracy is working to get businesses aware and on board so that they're ready to bid on things to help support things like housing and supplies and all that kind of stuff, because it's going to be like the creation of a whole new system.
Well,
it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, my understanding too is that Northrop Grumman tends to get involved or invest in the communities that they come into, because it's not just a quick in and out for the people and jobs that it's bringing in. They don't just fix it and leave. Like they
If you
have a presence
Northrop
for a while.
Grumman, chair's always open if you want to be in the podcast studio, expand it. We've got great design ideas for it, so it could be your podcast studio.
Ooh.
And actually,
we're no damn experts, sponsored by Northrop Grumman experts. Yeah.
Perfect match.
Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
Well, unless you want them to sponsor your podcast.
They can do both.
I think it's a well, no, I'll do that in my own time. So
Yeah, there you go. They can sponsor just you. Yeah.
Write our history in addition to. So how did you end up in this career path? Are you just a history nerd?
Yes. So I've often kind of wondered that. So I remember back when I was in undergrad, my history classes, so I had to take some gen ed classes, and there's history ones. And they were the only classes I looked forward to going to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so like I was just like, yes, I love this. And so at the end of my first semester, my sophomore year, I was like, I'm going to be a history major, and I'll just figure it out after that.
Yeah.
And I joined the Army, like I had been, like I said, to, because I also wanted to do intel. All the Bourne Identity movies came out, and I was like, I want to do that. And looking back on it, I'm like, who the heck wants to do that?
It doesn't look like a life I want to
No,
lead.
absolutely not.
Yeah.
I have no idea where I am.
And so even when I was in the Army, I was still reading lots of history books, and actually studied like African history and stuff from undergrad, just because I was like, this is completely new. What is going on with this?
Yeah.
And so I did the intel stuff in the Army. I did as a civilian for a couple years, but I kept coming back to history stuff. And I was actually working in Afghanistan in 2010. And towards the end of it, I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm going to come back. I'm going to figure out something else. And so applied to like 3 MA programs in Virginia. I got into George Mason outside of D.C. Did that. Loved it. Decided to keep doing I was like, oh, go get a PhD. That's cool.
Yeah.
And so I went back home to Memphis and did that. And as far as this job here, it was just on USA Jobs, and I applied for a bunch of them, and I interviewed and got this one, so here I am.
Here you are. And how long have you been in Great Falls for now?
I got here, so just over 4 years, so I started in July of 18.
Okay.
That's when I started this position.
And that was soon after, if I remember correctly, that's when you graduated with your doctorate, correct? Your
Yes.
PhD?
Yeah. Well, actually, I finished it when I was up here. So
Okay.
I had a little, it was more the defense, and you just did it over Zoom.
Gotcha.
So I did that in October.
Okay.
I remember after doing that, I didn't feel nervous or anything. And then about 4 hours later, all the stress and anxiety of the last 7 years
Just caught up with
came
you.
out of me.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. Felt good though when I was
then
done.
it was out and
yeah,
you
it was
were
done.
done,
It was yeah.
And then we met shortly after that while I eavesdropped on a conversation that you're having at the Color Guys.
Yes.
So that's not weird at all.
Yeah, not at all.
And fast forward now, and here we are. Yeah, all comes full circle. Yes.
Montana's just one big small town with
It's
long
true.
roads.
Yes.
Long main streets. That's the way it works here. So
Obviously, there's a lot more we could talk about or dive into, but is there anything else you feel that that we should know
The big
about
stuff?
Malmstrom, the big stuff? Yeah.
You
no.
think?
Yeah.
No.
Nope, we've covered it
Oh,
all.
actually, you know what?
talked
I'll tell you this one. So the one I keep, the thing I keep avoiding writing about just because it's really complicated.
Yeah.
So I decided to approach it as, what if I took UFOs seriously?
Oh boy, we'll have you back on.
Because right there's a whole lore about UFOs.
Yeah.
There has
Yeah.
got to be stuff at Malmstrom.
Mhm.
We have had this conversation on this podcast a number of times with people that have no clue. But Shannon does have a lead on we'll call him a UFO expert. I can't wait to have them on the podcast so we can ask the questions like, where are the missing film footage? Where is
Yeah.
it?
Well, it's interesting too because I mean I think in the last year there was at least in Congress kind of pressing the Navy and I think the Defense Intelligence Agency, I can't remember, to release
the
Yeah.
data,
Yeah.
release the information.
So it was actually that. I was like, what if I took this seriously?
Yeah.
And actually took it because it actually does coincide with a very groundbreaking radar system that doesn't work well. If that
I'm
makes any
telling
sense.
you.
Oh.
So
There are so many questions that I have regarding just the Mariani incident, not just aliens in general, but mostly why are you hanging out in the ball field as a grown man?
with your secretary.
Yes,
Yeah.
with a video camera.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my questions
I don't
start.
know this. I don't know this story.
That's why the Voyagers are the Voyagers.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they're
Yeah.
named that because of an incident. I don't know this.
I'll
Mariani
fill
thing.
you in off the
Okay.
air. You can also go back to the episode we did with Scott Letchery, and
Yeah.
he shared with us about
Yeah.
the weird incident. But
I got to
There's-
research before our UFO expert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's where my questions start.
Yeah.
And then it goes into further conspiracy theories on why all of a sudden is film missing.
Yeah.
And the military has nothing to do with it. Like, oh, we don't know.
Sure.
Must have just shrunk in
Sure.
shipping.
But I have a working hypothesis that is not exciting. But I think
on.
yeah.
What's the working hypothesis?
So the semi-automatic ground environment radar system, so Building 500, that massive building where pretty much all the offices are, was a computer
Okay.
at one point in time. So like 3 floors of it was a computer.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
That makes sense.
And it was part of
Back in the day.
a
Yeah.
radar system for air defense that was part of a big network. So there are a lot of these scattered all throughout the U.S., but its whole purpose was to try to detect Soviet long-range bombers coming into North American airspace. So there was coordination with Canada, with the distant early warning line way up in the Arctic, and stuff like that. And so the radar system was groundbreaking for computing and all this kind of stuff at the time, but it was also not very good. Right? It's that like when a new
Yeah.
car comes out, don't buy the first year model,
Right, you
buy
wanna
like the
wait till
5th year model.
yeah.
Let them work all the kinks out. And so what I suspect from a take all the fun out of it standpoint is that these UFOs, like UFO just means unidentified flying object.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
when you're dealing with a radar system that is not doing all you really want it to do, probably because the technology hasn't caught up to what you need it to do, right? Something will show up. You'll send fighter jets to go see what it is. There's nothing there.
Oh no.
It's aliens. It's UFOs. Blah blah. All this kind
Yeah.
of stuff. So actually,
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like your hypothesis.
It's not so fun.
I just think if Hollywood is going to make as many movies as they do about aliens, there's something out there.
There's
And you're probably going to poo-poo that just like you do ghosts, but I'm saying we can't be alone.
If we're going with because Hollywood made movies about it, we're kind of in a world of hurt
Please.
here.
You know it mirrors life.
I'm waiting for Jurassic Park to come real now. We probably know that technology exists, but let's not do it.
so unrelated. So when Jurassic World,
Yeah.
the first of the new with Chris Pratt came out, so I went to go see it.
Yeah.
I forgot who I saw it with. I enjoyed it. It was a great movie
Yeah.
for what it was. But I remember there at the very end. So you have that dinosaur they engineered running amok.
Yes.
And then you have Dallas Bryce Howard going open paddock 39.
Yeah.
And they go there and it's all dark. and she flashes the flare.
Yes, the flare.
And at the top of my lungs in that movie theater, I scream, "It's the T-Rex!" And the T-Rex comes barreling out of there. Oh, yeah, I was so excited. Yeah, it's the T-Rex.
I wish I
Just
could have
at
been
the
in that
top
movie
of my
theater.
lungs, I screamed that.
That's amazing.
And then boom, out comes the T-Rex to go kill the whatever that thing was.
You
Yeah.
cannot deny with the genetic modification and playing we do with science
No,
in that realm
I'm
that
sure-
this has not happened yet in some
Yeah, I'm sure
shape or
it could,
form.
maybe we can learn a lesson from Hollywood in this one and say, maybe let's
Yeah.
not.
I'm just saying.
I'm sure it exists. We just don't know about it. It's
Mm-hmm.
classified. It's a military conspiracy.
There are so many spots in Montana that you can't get to that I think there's a whole Jurassic World hanging out
Can't get
somewhere
to because
here.
it's someone's ranch.
Yeah.
And they have baby T-Rexes on their ranch.
You don't know.
I mean, I would hope they would have a very large cage or something.
They got some fences.
I do. When I was driving up there, when I first,
Concertine wire.
but when I was moving up here, so I drove through Cheyenne up.
Uh-huh.
'Cause my dad lives in Oklahoma City, so I kind of made a trip,
Uh-huh.
long road trip out of it. But that stretch from Cheyenne, pretty much all the way up to Billings,
Yeah.
I'm driving through there, and it's rainy, and it's still so springtime up here.
Yeah.
And I keep looking. I'm like, I keep waiting for a T-Rex to come running
Yeah.
across
Yes.
the
It's
interstate.
completely
Well,
possible.
Yeah, there's lots of their bones out there.
Mhm.
Have you been? I just told this. We recently had the symphony executive director and conductor emeritus on the podcast, and there's a John Williams
October 1.
October 1st concert coming up. So
Mhm.
John Williams, the composer of the music for Jurassic Park, and I just told this story here. So have you been out to Ryan Island? The Great Falls, Ryan Dam, Ryan Island.
the park with a little suspension.
Yeah, the
Yeah, I've
suspension
been out there a
bridge.
few times.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just telling them that my husband and I recently rewatched all of the Jurassic Parks, and that bridge out there that you cross that has the wire and gate with the foliage all over it. Does that not remind you of the bird cage from Jurassic Park? Was it 2?
Yeah.
2 or 3? It
Not
just
that committed
reminds.
to the movies. I just believe them.
I
to be
just
real.
watched them. But it reminds me, though, you're talking about driving through this
Mm-hmm.
and imagining a T-Rex. I'm out there walking, doing a little story, collecting content for our social channels, and I'm like,
Just waiting for a
this looks
bird
like
to come
a
down
bird
and eat
cage.
you.
This is the pterodactyls.
Pick her up and never
Yeah,
saw her
I'm like,
again,
thankfully
yeah.
it's bright and sunny right now. If it was
Her husband
cloudy,
calls him last time she was at Ryan Island.
she was in the
Best of
the
luck
new
to
bird cage. Yeah. Anyway, it just reminded me of that, of seeing
yeah.
Jurassic Park things everywhere now.
I do like Ryan Island. That's really it's a hidden gem. You got to make the
is.
effort to go out there.
you. Yeah.
Well, in the drive, you're looking, you're like, this is just
Where am I
prairie
heading?
out here.
Well,
Yeah.
I remember I stumbled upon that by sheer chance. So when I first moved up here, I
Could have came into our office. We'd have told you all about it. Just
saying.
FYI.
was the Keller guy. She could have told me that.
I could have, but I was
Ooh,
too busy
true.
listening to your
Touche.
stories.
Yeah.
but I move up here and I go, oh, I'm in Montana. Let me go hiking because
Yeah.
it's just one of those things that you live here. You have to do stuff outdoors
For sure.
Especially in the wintertime.
It makes the
otherwise you go
experience
crazy.
of living
Yeah.
here a lot more enjoyable.
And so basically all of the north side of the trail, I've hiked, not in one full hike, but I've
Yeah.
done all of it several times over.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things. I kept driving past Ryan Dam, and I was like, what the heck? Let me go see what it is. And I get there, and I'm like, what
Yeah.
the heck?
Wow.
Isn't it not
How
gorgeous?
did I, what?
Mm-hmm.
And it's never, there's always people there, but it's never crowded.
Right.
Because you got to make the effort to
Yeah.
get out there.
Yeah.
really
No,
cool.
it's a beautiful place.
Yeah, we always tell people words do not do it justice,
No,
and
just
really
go see
a
it.
picture isn't good enough to show. And we're like, no, it's worth the drive, even
Yeah.
if the water isn't flowing heavily. It's
Right.
really pretty
It's
out
still
there.
a really pretty experience. Well, and then you're like, well, I'm just outside of Great Falls, and
Yeah.
suddenly I'm here.
It feels like you're in
Yeah.
a whole nother world.
It does. Like Jurassic Park's birdcage. Without
It's not that
pterodactyls.
scary.
Just had a Rodan screech going in my head.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
sound effects.
Troy, will you come back and be a guest for us another time?
Sure.
Okay. I can't wait for
He
you
has
to
to
get your.
recover from
you-
this experience.
your
I'm a hard
UFO.
maybe.
Yeah.
Can't wait for you to
That's
get.
fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you finish your UFO story, come
Yeah.
back and we'll convince you that your
And
hypothesis
when this
was
becomes
wrong.
more than a draft and we can share it.
It should be soon. I can email it to you once it gets
Perfect.
approved. Yeah.
Oh, that
you
does
said
remind
3 to 5 years. Now all of a
No.
sudden.
So this okay. So let me explain how this works. So I write these research paper E1s, right? And so these are the in-house documents that I circulate throughout the entire Air Force History Museum program.
Okay.
I also write all of these with an eye towards trying to publish them. I can't publish them all
Yeah.
but I try to publish them all. And so this one, I think I can. And so I'll get back in contact with Diana DeStefano, the editor for the Montana Magazine of Western History plug,
Yes.
and go, hey, what do you think? And then she'll go, oh, yeah, add this, this, and this, send it back to us. I was like, okay, done.
Yeah.
Peer review takes 6 months, and then it takes another 6 months to print.
I feel honored. He sent me you can read it. That one, right? You sent me this, or was that?
No, I sent you.
Oh, you sent me that one.
Yeah, I
it
sent
had
you
the
that
same
one, yeah.
cover picture.
Oh, yeah, it all has the same
Dang
cover
it.
stuff. Yeah.
Don't try to be cooler than me.
Okay, where can we find? We'd like to be able to share your already published articles with others. How can we do that?
So the easiest way, because I don't have a website,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm working with our public affairs to kind of build a part on our webpage, because there is a history tab, and I've been talking to them about, well, what do we need to do? Because we don't. My understanding, they don't manage the actual all of the website. It's all done higher and stuff like that. And so hopefully I'll find a place to hang all that stuff sooner or later. But right now, it's very what's the word I'm looking for? Arrogant. But Google my name.
Okay.
And I have an academia.edu page.
Okay.
And so all the stuff that I've written that is either kind of in a draft form or published formally, it's on there, and you can just go hit download and download it to your computer and read it if you want.
Perfect.
Sweet.
And I can attach that to the show notes.
Yeah, and
this
if you want, I
podcast,
can send you a link to it just when I get back to my office, and then you
Perfect.
can just throw that in the show notes.
Right, because if you're interested at all, it's worth exploring and looking into, looking further into his articles.
And then the thing we completely didn't even mention is the birthday or anniversary of the Air
Yes,
Force.
so in context, yes. So this
So
podcast
this will
coming
be
out
fun.
right 2 days before. So the official birthday or anniversary of the Air Force is September 18th.
And so
Happy birthday, Air Force!
And like I told her, I did not know that.
Yeah.
there's a lot of things she tells me that I did not know. Like
I don't know
National
if that's
Ghost
good or
Hunting
bad.
Day.
I don't know.
Well, I'm going to go with it's fine that I don't know when National Ghost Hunting Day is. I should have probably known
This
when
is
Malmstrom's-
cooler than that, though.
Yeah,
This is
it's
a real
super
thing. This is a real thing. Air Force's birthday.
All right now. So, it isn't that old because the Army had it 1st, and that's just the way it goes. So,
And there's a whole planes thing too.
Yeah,
Those
the
had to be invented,
technology.
yeah.
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah.
we're in Air Force Base now and don't have planes,
Yes.
so what's the difference? I'm like, why? So the 75th anniversary, if you want to dig more into the history of the 341st and Malmstrom Air Force Base and Great Falls Air Space, whatever we're calling it, all that is contained in Troy's brain, which he then shares papers on. So everyone has an opportunity to fall in love and become more emotionally attached. And we didn't even talk about the first military mission to Montana, and that's we'll save for another time, which was Lewis and Clark. Yep, that was a military mission. So, folks,
Look at that plug.
a lot of fun coming up.
And we will say thank you for all of those who serve and are part of Malmstrom and
That's
part of the
true.
Montana Air National Guard and help make our community what it is, because both contribute a lot to those of us who live here and our community as a whole. So
Yeah, and being willing to serve is a heck of a thing because I didn't do it, and I appreciate those that did. So I didn't.
Oh, those
have
old
to.
men let you know. Don't worry.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they tell you to go to bed at 8:30
Yeah, be
because
like,
it's been a big
don't
day.
try to keep up with us.
Jeez.
I will say too, we've been talking about Malmstrom, but Montana Air National Guard just recently had a group that was deployed overseas return back home, and I happened to look up into the sky when I think it was like 5 of the C-130s that have been deployed were flying home, and they did a flyover of the Guard before they landed and met up with their families, but just happened to look up and see them when they were returning. I was like, oh, I wonder if they're returning home, because they're only like 2 C-130s right now because they're all deployed. And so they just came home. So welcome home to that crew as well.
So a lot of military history, a lot of fun. Plan your trip to be here September 18th on the 75th anniversary of the Air Force, so that you, if you're a resident of the United States, can
visit.
tour the museum.
Yes.
Thank you, Troy, for being on here.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed
putting
it.
up with our, subpar podcasting abilities.
Just general knowledge.
We don't have doctorates, which should be
Yes.
obvious to anyone by episode 90.
Yes.
We don't really have a clue what we're doing, but it's been fun.
Yep.
There you go.
So thank you all for listening, and until we see your bright, beautiful, smiling, happy face here in Great Falls, we hope you are creating amazing memories with your friends and family, wherever you are. Bye-bye.
We're no damn experts as the recorded claims from Great Falls, Montana, covering what you need to know about this amazing damn town.